If you've ever been handed a simple diplomatic mission by people who live in chandeliers, you get it. It's never simple. It's just simple for them because they aren't the ones getting stranded on hostile planets with their reputation in a blender. I was Prince Liren Vea, Omega Royal Envoy. Officially, a symbol of peace. Unofficially, a very expensive, very photogenic bargaining chip. My job was to walk into a room full of powerful strangers and make them feel like obeying the law was their own clever idea. I wore soft fabrics and sharper words. I smiled until my cheeks ached. I made compromise sound like a gift. So when the trade guild staged a totally legal blockade of Veyara, everyone looked at me like, well, that's what the prince is for. Veyara was all glittering oceans and glass cities, beautiful enough to make you forget how fast greed can rot a place. The guild wanted leverage. The republic wanted quiet. And I, apparently, was the soothing decorative ribbon you put on a bomb. The Senate hall smelled like money and fear. Polished marble. Hot lights. Perfume designed to say I am calm, I am rich, I have never sweated in my life. I stood at the center dais with my hands folded perfectly. Posture flawless. Voice steady. Inside, I was screaming. Because a blockade wasn't just ships and taxes and trade routes. A blockade meant hospitals rationing power. Families watching food prices crawl upward like a slow threat. It meant people who didn't do anything wrong paying for the privilege of existing near something valuable. The Senate chairwoman nodded like she was assigning me a light errand. Prince Vea, you'll travel to Veyara and negotiate a peaceful resolution. Peaceful. Sure. Then she added, like she was offering me a cape before the rain. A star knight will accompany you. A murmur went through the chamber. You could always tell when the room decided something was entertaining. Star Knights were the Republic's elite peacekeepers. Warriors with oaths and uniforms, and that whole I don't feel emotions, I simply endure them vibe. And yes, people loved pairing them with royal scandals like it was a sport. That's when I saw him. Care Vantos. He stood near the security line like he was carved out of night. Tall. Still. A face that didn't ask permission to be intimidating. And then, because the universe's jokes, my scent picked him up like a signal. Not in a cute way. In my entire nervous system just stood up straightway. It was the kind of compatibility flare that made every etiquette instructor I'd ever had die a second death in spirit. My pulse went loud in my ears. My skin went hot under the collar of my ceremonial coat. I did not move. I did not blink weird. I did not make the face. Because in the Senate, you can be terrified. You can be furious. You can be heartbroken. But you cannot be messy. Care's gaze lifted, just a fraction. It landed on me like a hand. For a second, his expression didn't change. But his scent did. A clean, sharp edge. Control. Focus. And underneath it, something that tightened like a promise. Oh, great. Love that for me. He bowed with perfect precision when he approached. No wasted motion. No smile. Prince Vea, he said, voice low enough to sound like a locked door. I've been assigned to your protection. Assigned. Like I was cargo. I gave him my best diplomatic smile. The one that looked warm and harmless and absolutely did not hint at the internal panic sprinting laps around my skull. Then I hope you're very good at your job, Star Knight. A flicker. The tiniest shift at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile. More like he was acknowledging the game. I am, he said. And the way he said it made my stomach drop in the worst, most embarrassing way. Behind me, my pilot droid Rel, 7 rolled forward with a soft whir and an anxious little beep like it was already predicting disaster. If Rel, 7 could sweat, it would have. I turned away before my face betrayed me. Because here's the thing about being a Royal Omega. Everyone thinks they know your story. Everyone thinks your bond is a political tool. Everyone thinks your choices belong to the state. And now the state had placed a Star Knight at my side. A man whose presence made my instincts sit up and beg. We left the Senate under a canopy of cameras and polite applause. Perfect smiles. Perfect bows. And the whole time, I could feel Care beside me like gravity. Quiet. Steady. Dangerously close. The shuttle malfunctioned 2 hours after we left the capital. And when I say malfunctioned, I mean the NAV system politely screamed, the engines coughed like a dying animal, and then we dropped out of hyperspace like the universe had simply decided to flick us off its shoulder. Rel, 7 made a noise that can only be described as robotic despair. A long, wavering beep. The sound of, I did not sign up for this. Care didn't panic. Of course he didn't. He just unbuckled, stood up, and braced himself like falling out of hyperspace was an average Tuesday. I, meanwhile, held onto my seat like it was going to personally save me from humiliation. The shuttle slammed into atmosphere with a shudder that rattled my teeth. We hit sand. We slid. We spun once, twice. And then everything went quiet in that awful, ringing way that makes you check your bones with your mind. I blinked. I inhaled. Hot air. Dry dust. And the faintest edge of Care's scent, still controlled, still steady, like even physics couldn't make him lose composure. My throat was tight. My schedule didn't include dying today, I said, because sarcasm is how I keep my organs from leaving my body. Care looked at me. Just a brief scan, eyes, hands, posture. Are you injured? There was no softness in the question. Just focus. Competence. No, I said. But emotionally, I am devastated. Rel, 7 rolled in an uneven circle, scanning the wreck like it was trying to calculate the odds of suing someone. We were half buried in dunes on a sunburned planet that was definitely not on my itinerary. The sky was pale and hard. The horizon shimmered with heat. Care moved through the shuttle's broken door and surveyed the landscape like he'd been born on hostile terrain. His cloak barely shifted in the wind. He looked unreal, like a myth someone had cruelly dropped into my life. We're off course, he said. That is one way to put it, I muttered. Care crouched by the engine panel. Rel, 7 scooted closer, anxious beeps escalating. I watched Care's hands, steady, precise, work inside the torn metal. He didn't just yank wires like a hero in a cheap holodrama. He listened. He tested. He adjusted with patience. And then, this is the part that ruined me. Rel, 7 made a distressed sound, a short stuttering beep that meant one of its stabilizers had cracked in the impact. It tried to compensate and wobbled. Care's head tilted. He reached out and steadied the droid with one hand, like it was something fragile. Easy, he said. Easy. To a pilot droid. In the middle of a desert. After nearly crashing. I stared. Because people spoke to me like that, gentle tones, careful words, when they wanted to manage me. When they wanted me quiet. But Care wasn't managing Rel 7. He was being kind. My chest did that annoying thing where it tightened for reasons I didn't authorize. The wind gusted, and my scent shifted without my permission. Stress and adrenaline, sharp and bright. I clamped down on it instinctively, forcing control the way I'd been trained. Care's shoulders went subtly still. Not dramatic. Not obvious. Just the tiniest pause. His gaze flicked toward me like his senses had pulled on a thread. Oh no. I turned away too fast, pretending to inspect the dunes like I had any idea what I was looking for. Any chance this planet has a luxury resort hidden under the sand? No, he said. Tragic. Care got the comm system working enough to produce static and insult us. No signal. No satellites close enough. No friendly ships. And, because the day had decided to be thorough, the shuttle's emergency beacon was missing. Not broken. Not damaged. Missing. Care's jaw tightened once, barely visible. Someone had removed it before we launched. This wasn't an accident. It was a message. Someone wanted the Peace Prince to vanish quietly. And if possible, they wanted the Star Knight to vanish with me. I swallowed hard and forced my voice not to shake. So, we were sabotaged. Yes, Care said. He didn't look surprised. He looked angry, but contained, like a blade in a sheath. Rel, 7 beeped a question, something about survival probability, and I didn't need a translation. I was doing the math too. We had water for a day, rations for 2, and the kind of heat that can cook you from the inside if you pretend you're invincible. Care scanned the horizon again. There's an outpost east. Old trade route station. How do you know that? I asked. He hesitated, just a fraction. Then, maps. Sure. Maps. Not suspicious at all. We left the shuttle behind like a dying creature. Sand already climbing its sides. The walk was humiliating. My boots were made for marble floors and ceremonial stairs. Not dunes. Not heat. Not survival. I tried not to complain. I tried very hard. Care walked slightly ahead, setting the pace. He didn't offer me his arm. He didn't try to guide me like I was delicate. And weirdly, I appreciated that more than I wanted to admit. The sun burned down. My skin felt tight. My mouth went dry. At some point, my knees wobbled. Just once. Care stopped immediately. He didn't touch me. He didn't crowd me. He just stood close enough that his shadow fell over my face. Sit, he said. It wasn't an order the way the Senate gave orders. It was the way someone speaks when they're trying to keep you alive. I sank into the sand with a dignity level of approximately 0. Rel. 7 rolled in anxious circles. Care knelt, opened the canteen, and held it out. Our fingers brushed as I took it. A tiny contact. Nothing. My body reacted like it was everything. Heat flickered under my skin, not the kind that meant that not yet, just the kind that meant my instincts were awake and watching. Care's scent stayed controlled. But I caught the faintest shift, like his restraint had to tighten. He looked away first. I swallowed water and tried to pretend my life wasn't becoming a romance tragedy with sand. Why you? I asked quietly, because curiosity is also how I cope. Why assign Care Vantos to me? His gaze returned. Dark eyes. Too steady. Orders, he said. That's not an answer. A pause. Then, like he was paying a price for honesty, he said, because no one else volunteered. That landed heavier than it should have. No one volunteered. Meaning guarding me wasn't an honor. It was a risk. A risk tied to Care's reputation. To some old scandal he hadn't mentioned, but everyone whispered about. We reached the outpost near dusk. It wasn't a resort. It was a half-collapsed station built from rusted metal and stubbornness. A single solar panel. A door that groaned like it hated being needed. Inside smelled like dust, old oil, and abandonment. But it had shade. It had a water recycler that still worked after Care kicked it once. It had a corner we could barricade. Safety, in the loosest possible definition. Rel. 7 plugged into a wall port and sighed in beeps. Care checked every angle, every entry point. Then he sat on the floor across from me, back against the wall, like he was turning himself into a barrier. I watched him in the dim light. The Star Knight who didn't panic. The man who spoke gently to a scared droid. The alpha whose presence made my instincts hum like a live wire. And I realized something that made my stomach drop. We weren't just stranded. We were being hunted. And my scent, my very existence, was the kind of signal predators loved to follow. We didn't sleep much that night. Not because anything happened. Nothing happened. But because the outpost creaked in the wind like it was whispering, someone will find you. And because my instincts were doing that annoying thing where they kept checking Care's location like he was a lighthouse, and I was a ship with bad decision-making. Every time I drifted off, I'd jolt awake and smell him, controlled, steady, too close for my nervous system to be normal about it. Care stayed on watch. Of course he did. Star Knights probably come out of training with a certificate that says I do not rest, I only pause. Near dawn, Rel. 7 beeped urgently and projected a weak signal trace onto the outpost wall. It wasn't a rescue ping. It was chatter. Local frequencies. Trade route gossip. The kind of information that spreads faster than truth because it tastes better. And in the middle of it was my name. Prince Liren Vea. Missing. Possible defection. Possible kidnapping. Possible scandal. They were already writing the story. And the worst part, they were making it entertaining. My comm bracelet buzzed, finally catching a thin feed from the wider net, and the first thing that loaded wasn't an official alert. It was a hollow headline. A photo of me stepping out of the Senate hall yesterday. Perfect smile. Perfect posture. And beside me, slightly blurred but unmistakable, Care. Caption. Peace Prince flees with Star Knight. Romance or treason? Oh. So we were doing this. I stared at the projection until my jaw hurt from clenching. Care glanced over, and for the first time, his comm cracked enough to show irritation. Not at me. At the world. He didn't ask to see the headline. He already knew what it meant. They're shaping public opinion, he said. They're sharpening it, I muttered. Into a knife. Rel. 7 made an angry little beep that felt like agreement. Care studied the signal trace again. There's a port town 2 clicks south. Smuggler traffic. We can get transport. Transport, I echoed. From smugglers. Yes. I rubbed my face. Do they accept royal gratitude as payment, or will I need to sell an organ? Care's eyes flicked to mine. Stay close. Let me speak. That was sensible. Smart. Protective. It also made my instincts do a small, pleased backflip, which I ignored with the maturity of someone who definitely deserved to be in charge of diplomatic relations. We left the outpost, moving low through dunes and rock ridges until the air changed. Less clean heat, more fuel and metal and people. The port town wasn't on any official map. It was a knot of ships and tents and rusted platforms pressed against a canyon wall. lit with string lights that tried very hard to make lawlessness look festive. The streets smelled like engine grease and fried spice and pheromones layered over each other like bad perfume decisions. Rel, 7 tucked close to my leg like a nervous pet. Care moved like he belonged anywhere danger existed. Shoulders relaxed, gaze scanning, hands empty but somehow still threatening. Every alpha in that place noticed him. And then, unfortunately, they noticed me. Because I was wearing trying not to be recognized clothes that still somehow looked expensive. And because my posture had been trained by palace instructors who thought slouching was a form of moral decay. A smuggler leaned against a crate and smiled at me like I was a rumor come true. "Well, well," he said, voice syrupy. "That's a very pretty traveler. What pack do you belong to?" My skin went cold. That question wasn't casual here. It was a hook. Before I could answer, Care stepped half a pace closer. Not touching me, not claiming me, just close enough that his presence wrapped around mine like a warning. "He belongs to himself," Care said, flat and final. The smuggler's smile twitched, like he didn't enjoy being reminded that consent was real. He backed off. I exhaled slowly. Care didn't look at me, but his voice dropped. Head down. Eyes forward. "Yes, sir," I whispered, because if I didn't joke, I was going to start shaking. We found the bar because it was the loudest place and smelled the most like bad decisions. Inside, it was heat and music and negotiation disguised as flirting. People laughed too loudly. Alphas sized each other up like they were bidding on dominance. Betas watched everything with the careful eyes of people who survive by noticing. And me? I put on my Peace Prince face like armor. External, soft smile, calm eyes, delicate politeness. Internal, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. Care ordered water. Just water. That, more than anything, told me he was serious about getting us out alive. No distractions. No slip-ups. We were halfway through asking around for a pilot when the room shifted. You can feel it when someone important enters. Not because they sparkle, though some do, but because everyone subtly recalculates their behavior around them. A man in a tailored coat stepped into the bar like it was a Senate gala instead of a criminal watering hole. He was beautiful in the sharp way. Alpha. Expensive scent control. Perfect hair like it had never met wind. He smiled as if he'd practiced in front of mirrors that cost more than my childhood home. "Prince Vea," he said, loud enough for people nearby to hear, but soft enough to feel intimate. "I'm so relieved you're safe." My blood turned to ice. Because I knew who he was. Lord Soraldane, an alpha diplomat attached to the trade guild's negotiations. A man who shook hands in public and stabbed people with policy in private. He held his hands open, no weapons, no threat, like he was offering comfort. And that was the threat. Care's posture shifted, subtle, controlled, placing himself just slightly between Dane and me. Dane's gaze slid to Care like he was noticing furniture. "Oh," he said pleasantly. "They sent you." Translation, how embarrassing. Care didn't react. Dane smiled wider, turning back to me. "You've caused quite the stir, Your Highness. The Senate is concerned." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "And the public is fascinated." My bracelet buzzed again. Another headline. Another angle. They were feeding the story in real time. Dane glanced at my wrist like he owned the concept of information. "Rumors are delicate things," he murmured. "They can ruin reputations. Especially in Omega Royals." There it was. The polite knife. I forced my smile to stay gentle. "Is that concern, Lord Dane? Or an invitation to blackmail?" His laugh was soft, charming. "Oh, I'd never." And then, like he was asking about the weather. "Tell me, where will you bond?" I went very still. That question wasn't appropriate. Not in public. Not ever. But he asked it like it was inevitable, like the galaxy existed for alphas to schedule Omega futures. Care's voice cut in, calm and lethal. "He won't be bonding." Dane blinked, one perfect, surprised blink. Then he turned his smile on Care. "How admirable," Dane said. "You must be very devoted." A pause. "And yet here you are. Alone. With him. Stranded. Disgraced." His eyes returned to me. Unprotected. Unprotected. Like I wasn't standing right here. Like I didn't have a mind and teeth. Dane lowered his voice again, sweet as poison. "I can offer protection, Prince Vea. A ship. A public statement. A structured arrangement." His gaze flicked down my body like he was appraising a diplomatic asset. "You would be safe with my pack." My stomach rolled. Because that's what he wanted. Not me. Not my happiness. My image. If he could be the alpha who rescued the Peace Prince, he'd own the narrative. And the Trade Guild would own Vayara. I tightened my fingers around the edge of the table until my knuckles hurt. Then I felt Care's presence, steady beside me, like he was giving me space to choose. Not saving me. Not speaking for me. Just there. I lifted my chin. "Thank you, Lord Dane," I said, voice bright. "But I'm not available for acquisition." A couple of smugglers nearby snorted into their drinks. Dane's smile stayed in place, but his eyes hardened. Losing face doesn't always look like yelling. Sometimes it looks like a man who's used to winning realizing he can't bully you without witnesses noticing. He recovered instantly, because of course he did. "Then at least allow me to escort you back to the capital," he said, "to clear up these unfortunate rumors." Care's gaze sharpened. He knew what that meant. An escort, arranged by Dane, would be a cage with polite bars. I swallowed, and in the space between breaths, an idea formed, reckless, strategic, and terrifying. If rumors wanted a story, fine. We would give them one. Not Dane's version. Not the Guild's version. Ours. I leaned slightly toward Care, keeping my smile for the room. My voice was barely audible. "Fake bond," I whispered. Care's eyes snapped to mine. For one heartbeat, I saw something raw there: shock, refusal, fear of what it would mean. And then his control reasserted itself like armor locking into place. "That would escalate," he murmured. "Yes," I whispered back. "That's the point." Dane was watching us, sensing movement like a predator. I forced my smile wider, turning toward him with rehearsed sweetness. "Lord Dane," I said, loud enough for nearby ears. "How kind of you to worry." His smile returned, smug. I lifted my hand, slowly, deliberately, and rested it on my own chest, where a bond mark would be. A gesture. A suggestion. The room's attention sharpened. The air changed. Care didn't move. But his scent shifted, barely, just enough to make my instincts flare again. Not possession. Decision. He stepped close, not touching, still careful, but close enough that everyone could see the shape of it. A protective alpha. A royal Omega. A narrative the galaxy already wanted. Dane's smile faltered for the first time. I looked at Care, meeting his eyes. And silently, I asked the only question that mattered. "Are you willing?" Care's voice came low, only for me. "Your choice," he said. "Consent. Always." My chest tightened so hard it almost hurt. I nodded once. Then I turned back to the room, still smiling like a prince who'd never been afraid in his life. And I said sweetly, dangerously, "I'm already protected." Getting back to the capital with smugglers is exactly as glamorous as it sounds. Which is to say, I spent 4 hours wedged between a crate labeled Fragile, Lies, and Rel 7's stressed out beeping, while Care stood near the hatch like a statue someone forgot to put in a museum. We kept the already protected story simple. Not detailed. Not dramatic. Just believable. Because in a reputation-driven galaxy, the simpler the lie, the faster it spreads. And spread it did. The moment our ship docked, my bracelet buzzed so hard I thought it might vibrate into another dimension. Notifications. Mentions. Screenshots. People zooming in on our canyon bar moment like it was ancient prophecy. A grainy clip was already everywhere. Me smiling. Care stepping in close. Lord Dane's face doing that tiny glitch of wait. I'm losing control of the narrative. Caption. Protected by A-Star Knight? Another. Omega Prince finally chooses. Another. I S this. A bond. I stared at the feed and felt my soul attempt to exit my body out of sheer embarrassment. Care glanced at my wrist. "You don't have to read it." "I have to read it," I whispered. "This is my species' natural habitat. Public opinion. Pain." Rel 7 beeped sympathetically and projected a tiny popular sentiment graph that was trending upward in the worst way. We entered the government district under the kind of security escort that looks protective but feels like a cage. And the capital, oh, the capital, was performing. It always was. Buildings like glass blades. Plazas polished so clean they reflected the sky. Every official wearing their power the way some people wear perfume. Too much and on purpose. We walked through the outer Senate hall, and I could feel eyes on me like heat lamps. External Lyran, calm smile, chin up, diplomatic grace. Internal Lyran, I am a small animal pretending to be royalty. Please do not perceive me. Care stayed half a step behind, and to my left. Not grabbing. Not crowding. Just present. A shield that never touched me unless I chose it. And the thing about pretending to be bonded? It messes with your body. Because my instincts kept whispering, if he's your alpha, why aren't you safe yet? And Care's instincts, based on the way his scent tightened every time someone looked at me too long, were doing their own math. We reached a corridor lined with portraits of past senators, all stern faces and expensive frames. I leaned toward Care, voice barely audible. Okay, I murmured. We need ground rules. Care's gaze stayed forward. Agreed. Rule 1, I said. No touching unless necessary. Yes. Rule 2, I added, heart punching my ribs. If my scent does anything inconvenient, you do not, I swallowed. You do not override me. His head turned slightly, eyes on mine now. I won't, he said. Simple. Immediate. Like it wasn't even a question. That steadiness hit me harder than it should have. Rule 3, I said, because if I didn't keep talking I might do something stupid like feel things. We don't let them turn this into a leash. Care's jaw tightened. They already have, he murmured. We're taking it back. We entered the Senate antechamber. And that's where the face culture really showed its teeth. A cluster of diplomats casually waited near the fountain, which is capital speak for we heard you're trending, and we'd like to sniff the drama in person. One of them, a beta with pearls and a smile sharp enough to cut glass, tilted her head. Prince Vea, she said brightly. What a relief. We were simply worried. Translation, we were hoping you'd be dead or disgraced, but alive also works. Another, an alpha senator with an immaculate suit, looked Care up and down. Oh, he said, like he'd found a hair in his drink. A Star Knight escort. Escort. Not partner. Not bond. Not choice. Just escort. How brave, the beta continued, gaze flicking over me. To travel without your usual household guard. It must be challenging. Challenging. Like I was a fragile luxury pet. I smiled softly. Only if you're unused to discomfort, I said. Her smile twitched. Care didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence was the sentence. Then Lord Dane arrived. Of course he did. He glided into the room wearing tailored victory, like he'd already written the ending and expected us to follow the script. His expression was warm, concerned. Performance so perfect it made my skin itch. Your Highness, he said, taking my hand and lifting it toward his lips. Care stepped forward. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just inevitable. His hand didn't strike. He simply placed 2 fingers under my wrist, guiding my hand back toward my own chest with careful gentleness. A refusal without violence. A boundary without humiliation. Dane froze for half a heartbeat. And then he laughed lightly, like this was all a charming misunderstanding. Ah, he said. I see the rumors were not entirely exaggerated. He looked straight at me, polite poison in his eyes. I'm happy you found such devotion. Devotion. Like I'd picked a guard dog. I held his gaze and let my smile turn sweet enough to rot teeth. I've found respect, I said. It's surprisingly rare. Around us, the antechamber went very quiet in that delicious way. Because I'd just done the worst thing you can do to a status-obsessed person. I implied they were lacking. Dane's nostrils flared. His hand tightened on his own glass. He didn't explode. He was too trained for that. But I saw it. The losing face tremor. The microcrack. He recovered by turning to the room with a graceful sigh. Truly, he said, loud enough for witnesses, I only want what's best for the Republic. Yes, of course. The Republic. Always the Republic. Never personal ambition disguised as patriotism. Then he leaned closer to me again, voice low. Be careful, Prince Vea, he murmured. A Star Knight's oath doesn't include protecting you from consequences. My pulse jumped. Because he wasn't threatening Care. He was threatening me. My pregnancy hadn't happened yet. At least I didn't know it, but the fear still sat in my bones. The knowledge that my body could become evidence, scandal, leverage. I kept my voice light. Thank you for your concern, Lord Dane, I said. I'll file it with the rest. Rel, 7 beeped behind me like it was cheering. Care's hand hovered near the small of my back. Hovered, not touching, like he was asking permission with his posture. I leaned back just enough that his palm made contact. A single point of warmth through fabric. My body went still. Not in panic. In relief. And the room noticed. Phones lifted. Not official cameras. Those were banned here. Personal devices. The gossip kind. A whispered ripple moved through the diplomats. A new story being born in real time. I should have hated it. I did hate it. But I also understood the power of it. If they wanted a narrative, fine. We would use it as a blade. We walked into the Senate chamber with my smile locked in place, and Care beside me like a storm held in human shape. External Liren, serene, unbothered, royal. Internal Liren, if I faint on the Senate floor, please know it's entirely on brand for my life. The chairwoman called the session to order. And as the first senator began to speak, slowly, carefully, like every word was a coin, I felt Care's hand steady at my back. One touch, one choice, and I realized something terrifying. The lie was working too well. Because the more we performed it, the more my instincts started believing it. And if my body decided this bond was real before my mind caught up, oh no, that would be catastrophic. The Senate hearing went exactly how you'd expect a hearing run by people who think empathy is a budget line item. Lots of slow voices. Lots of with all due respect. Lots of pretending the blockade wasn't strangling real families. External me, serene, diplomatic, basically a painting. Internal me, if one more man in an expensive suit says unfortunate circumstances, I'm going to bite someone. They called a recess halfway through, which is capital speak for, we need time to decide which lie is most profitable. Care escorted me out through a side corridor. Not because I was fragile, because I was a target. The moment the chamber doors shut behind us, the air changed. Less polished performance. More predator math. Rel, 7 rolled close, projecting a route map toward the secure transit lifts that would take us to the protected wing. 2 minutes, Care murmured. Stay with me. As if I had any intention of wandering off alone in a building full of people who could ruin me with a sentence. We stepped into the lift. The doors sealed. And then, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. The lift shuddered like it had been hit from the outside. Rel, 7 made a strangled alarm beep and flashed a warning icon. External override. Care's entire body went still. Not frozen, focused. His hand lifted, hovering near my shoulder, not touching. Permission, he asked low. Even now. Even in the middle of whatever this was. My throat went tight. I nodded. His palm settled on my shoulder, firm, grounding, and my instincts snapped awake so fast it was almost painful. The lift dropped. Not a gentle descent. A sudden, stomach-lurching plunge that stole the breath from my lungs. I stumbled. Care caught me immediately, one arm bracing me against his chest, the other planted to steady us as the floor vibrated. The doors tried to open. Tried. Metal screamed. The seam split, and a blade-thin canister rolled through the gap and clinked against the floor like a casual insult. My brain had just enough time to think, that's not supposed to be here. Then it hissed. Scent suppressant. And underneath it, something harsher. Something designed to scramble instincts. My body reacted before my mind did. My lungs seized. My skin went cold hot. My scent spiked, bright and panicked, like a flare in the dark. Oh no. Oh no, oh no. Heat didn't hit like a romance novel. It hit like my nervous system deciding to set itself on fire because fear had pressed the wrong switch. I clamped down, trying to control it the way I'd been trained. But training doesn't matter when someone weaponizes your biology. Care's arm tightened around me, not possessive. Protective. He kicked the canister hard, sending it skittering away, then tore his cloak free and wrapped it around my shoulders like a barrier. His scent surged. Not wild. Not claiming. Just steadier. Stronger. Like he was building a wall out of himself. I clutched the front of his uniform, because my hands needed something real. My vision tunneled. The lift shook again, harder, like someone was trying to rip it open. I heard voices beyond the doors. Muffled. Urgent. Take the Omega alive. Alive. Not safe. Not free. Alive like I was property. A sob tried to crawl up my throat. I swallowed it down like poison. Care leaned close, voice at my ear. Liren. He said my name like an anchor. Look at me. I forced my eyes up. His face was inches from mine. Calm, controlled. And underneath it, the strain of restraint so intense it was almost visible. His jaw clenched once, like he was holding back something instinctive and sharp. And then he asked, in the middle of the chaos, the single most important question anyone has ever asked me. What do you want? Not what should I do? Not what does protocol say? Not I'm taking control. What do you want? My throat worked. The air tasted like chemicals and fear. I wanted to be safe. I wanted to breathe. I wanted to not be a symbol. And, stupidly, terrifyingly, I wanted him. Not in an explicit way. In a choose me and don't let go way. I shook with the effort of speaking. I want you to stay, I managed. Care's eyes softened, just a fraction. Say it clearly, he murmured. Not because he doubted me. Because he respected me. My chest heaved. I choose you, I said. And something in the air changed. Not the scent suppressant. Not the vibration of the lift. Something older. Deeper. Like my instincts and his had been circling each other for days, and the moment I spoke, they finally stopped pretending. Heat didn't vanish. But it steadied, like it had somewhere to go that wasn't panic. Care's hand slid from my shoulder to my wrist, careful, asking without words. I turned my palm and laced my fingers with his. And that's when it happened. A warmth bloomed at the side of my throat, under the skin, not painful, just present. A mark forming like a promise, deciding it didn't care about politics. My breath hitched. Care's gaze dropped, then snapped back up, alarm flickering across his control. He didn't look triumphant. He looked terrified of hurting me. I didn't, he started. I know, I whispered. Because I did. He hadn't taken. He hadn't forced. He'd asked. And I'd answered. Outside, the lift doors finally buckled. Metal shrieked. A hand forced the seam wider. Care moved instantly, cloak still around me, body between mine, and the opening like he could rewrite physics with stubbornness. He didn't draw a weapon. Star Knights didn't need to make a show of violence to be dangerous. He simply spoke, voice like cold steel. Step back. The figure outside hesitated. They smelled it too. The shift. The bond. Even through chemicals and panic, it was unmistakable. An Omega no longer available. An Alpha now accountable. Attackers hate accountability. The assailant swore and pulled away, and the corridor alarm finally screamed to life, security override kicking in late, because of course it did. The lift jolted to a stop. Lights flared bright. Footsteps thundered. Government security poured into the corridor with stun batons and shouted orders, dragging a would-be kidnapper out of sight. And through it all, Care didn't loosen his hold until I could breathe without shaking. When it was over, I realized I was still gripping his hand. I didn't let go. We were rushed into a protected room. White walls, medical scanners. Too many officials asking too many questions like my trauma was a committee agenda. I sat on the edge of a sterile couch, Care standing close enough to block the worst of the room without blocking me. The chairwoman arrived, face tight with controlled fury. The trade guild denies involvement, she said sharply. Which is capital speak for. They're lying, and we're going to pretend we can't prove it. Lord Dane appeared behind her a moment later. Perfect suit. Perfect concern. I could have screamed. His gaze flicked to my throat, to the faint warmth under my skin. And for the first time since I met him, he looked genuinely unsettled. Because the story had slipped out of his hands. I looked him dead in the eyes and smiled softly. Not friendly. Not sweet. Just certain. Care's hand hovered near my back again, a question. I leaned into it. Answer. The chairwoman cleared her throat. We'll need a full medical scan, Your Highness. After exposure to, she gestured vaguely, as if saying pheromone weapon out loud was impolite. I nodded, because refusing would look suspicious, and because I was suddenly exhausted down to my bones. The scanner hummed over me. The medic adjusted the settings, frowning. Bond signatures can spike your markers, she muttered, more to herself than anyone. In bonded pairs, the body sometimes flags gestation early, before it's even obvious to the carrier. A soft green light traced my body. The medic frowned at the readout once. Twice. Then her eyes widened. My stomach dropped. She lowered her voice, professional but careful. Prince Vea, she said, are you aware you're in early gestation? She lifted the screen slightly, so only I could see it. Early markers, she clarified quickly. Not sudden. Just detectable now. The compatibility and stress could have triggered it days ago, and the bond made it impossible to miss. For a second, the room tilted. My brain tried to reject the sentence like it was a bad translation. Gestation. That word didn't belong to me. Not now. Not like this. My hand flew to my abdomen on instinct, as if I could shield something I hadn't even known existed. What? I breathed. The medic glanced to the chairwoman, then back to me. It's very early, she said quickly. But the markers are clear. I felt cold, then hot, then like I might float away. Across the room, Care went utterly still. His control didn't break, but his eyes did. Shock, fear, and something so tender it made my chest hurt. He stepped closer, stopping just short of touching me, as if even now he wouldn't take space without permission. His voice was rough. Liren. I looked up at him, throat tight. The bond at my neck felt warmer, like it was awake and listening. I should have been terrified. And I was. But underneath the fear was something else. A strange, stubborn spark of hope. Because the galaxy had tried to make me disappear. And instead, I had become undeniable. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to work. I guess, I said, trying and failing to joke, the fake bond really overachieved. Care exhaled. One sharp breath that sounded like relief and panic colliding. And then very softly, he asked again, because this was who he was. What do you want? My eyes stung. I pressed my palm to my stomach, then looked straight at him. I want to live, I said. I want to protect this. And I want you with me. Care's hand finally touched mine. Careful. Steady. Then I'm here, he said. And in that sterile room full of politics and lies, with my body rewriting my future without permission, I believed him. I didn't get a full night to process the fact that my body had quietly decided to start a whole new life. Because the Capitol doesn't pause for personal crises. They didn't call it continuing the hearing. They called it an emergency session, because canceling would have looked like weakness. And the Capitol would rather bleed than look weak. It just schedules them between votes. By the next morning, the Senate was packed. Also after the lift, no one said fake anymore. Not out loud. Not with their full chest. Not physically, there are rules about spacing and security and decorum. But spiritually. The kind of pact that means every senator brought their sharpest smile and their most rehearsed outrage. External Liren, composed, glowing with royal serenity, hands folded like I wasn't internally vibrating. Internal Liren. I am one bad comment away from throwing a ceremonial chair. They seated me at the front, under lights that made my skin look like porcelain. Perfect for broadcast. Perfect for narrative. The chairwoman opened with a grave voice about unfortunate events and threats to stability. Threats to stability. That was a fun way to describe. Someone tried to gas me and kidnap me in a Senate lift. Lord Dane sat 3 rows down, immaculate as ever. He wore a concerned expression like it was custom-tailored. When his gaze met mine, he gave me a small nod. The kind that said, "We can still fix this if you cooperate." I smiled back. The kind that said, "Watch me set your reputation on fire with a match and good diction." Care stood behind me, a quiet silhouette of control. Not looming, not claiming, just present. My chosen constant in a room full of people performing loyalty like it was theater. And gods, the performance was intense today. A senator with silver cuffs leaned toward another and said too loudly, "What a complicated situation for an Omega royal." Complicated. Translation, scandalous. Another senator, a beta with a voice smooth as oil, asked with practiced innocence, "Should His Highness be making policy decisions in his condition?" Condition. Like I was ill. Like I was a liability. My fingers tightened around the armrest. Care's hand hovered at my back, questioning. I breathed once, slow, and kept my smile gentle. "Thank you for your concern," I said into the chamber mic, voice calm enough to be weaponized. My mind is not located in my abdomen. A ripple went through the room. Not laughter. Senators don't laugh when they might look unserious. But that subtle recalculation. A few heads turned. A few mouths tightened. Because I'd done it again. I'd made them look small without raising my voice. Lord Dane's expression remained politely blank. But his eyes hardened. The chairwoman called for testimony. Guild representatives spoke first, of course. A parade of men and women with perfect hair and perfect alibis. They said the blockade was temporary. They said it was a lawful trade protection measure. They said they'd never sabotage a royal shuttle. They also said, this part was my favorite, that I had misunderstood the situation. Misunderstood. Like I'd simply wandered into an attempted kidnapping out of confusion. I listened. I nodded at the right moments. I played the role of the calm prince who was too gracious to interrupt. Inside, I counted my breaths like I was holding an animal still. Then the chairwoman signaled me. "Prince Vea," she said, "do you have evidence of guild involvement?" The chamber went quiet. You could hear fabric shift. You could hear someone's bracelet buzz and get hastily muted. A room like this loves a revelation. It just wants to be sure it's on the winning side of it. I rose slowly. My body felt different now, heavier in a way I couldn't explain, not yet. Not visible, but real enough that every instinct screamed at me to protect myself. I rested one hand lightly on the dais as I spoke, steadying more than my balance. "I do," I said. Dane's gaze sharpened, like a predator hearing movement. I continued, voice measured. The beacon from our shuttle was removed before launch. The lift override was external, and the canister used against me contained a compound restricted under Republic law. The guild rep scoffed politely. That proves nothing. Anyone could. Rel 7, I said. My pilot droid rolled forward with a nervous beep that sounded like it was about to apologize for existing. Then it projected a hologram. And the Senate chamber, for once, went silent in a real way. Not performative. Not polite. Real. The hologram showed a maintenance bay. A guild insignia on a uniform sleeve. A hand removing my shuttle's emergency beacon and placing it into a case. Then another clip. A private corridor. Lord Dane's assistant, distinctive posture, distinctive ring, handing a sealed canister to a security contractor whose face was blurred but whose badge code was visible. I didn't need to add commentary. The evidence spoke with the cruel clarity of reality. The guild representative's face changed. You could watch it happen. First, confusion. Then fear. Then, anger so fast it looked like heat rising. The rep stood. Too quickly. His chair tipped backward and clattered, loud as a gunshot in the hush. That's the thing about losing face in a room built on image. It isn't just embarrassment. It's a physical emergency. The rep's hands gripped the desk edge hard enough his knuckles blanched. That footage is doctored, he snapped, voice cracking. Cracking. In the Senate. A senator near the front arched an eyebrow, almost imperceptible, as if to say, oh, he's emotional. And that tiny judgment was enough to make the guild rep unravel further. You can't, he started again, then stopped, realizing he sounded desperate. Desperate is social death here. Lord Dane stayed seated. Still. Calm. But his scent shifted, sharp, controlled panic masked under expensive composure. He leaned toward the chairwoman, whispering. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the posture. Contain this. Redirect. Save me. The chairwoman didn't lean back. She didn't whisper back. She just looked at him, and something in her gaze said, not today. Because Dane had overplayed his hand. He'd made it public. He'd made it loud. And now the Senate, always hungry, had blood in the water. The chairwoman's voice rang out. Star Knight Vantos. Care stepped forward. The chamber's attention shifted like a wave. Star Knights weren't supposed to testify. They were supposed to stay silent, neutral, untouchable. Care stood at the witness mark with his hands behind his back, posture straight, expression controlled. And then he spoke. I was assigned to protect Prince Vea, he said. I observed the sabotage indicators firsthand. I confirmed the compound used in the lift attack. And I intercepted communications tying the contractor to trade guild channels. Every word landed like a hammer. Because he wasn't speculating. He wasn't spinning. He was stating fact. And the senators loved fact when it was convenient. A senator snapped. Star Knight, are you aware this violates your order's neutrality? Care didn't flinch. Yes. A ripple of shock. He continued anyway. My oath is to protect the Republic, he said, voice steady. Not the comfort of those exploiting it. That line went through the chamber like electricity. People sat a little straighter. Phones buzzed with silent updates. A new clip would be circulating within minutes. Star Knight breaks silence, calls out exploitation. Lord Dane finally stood. Slowly. Carefully. He smiled like he was at a gala, not on the edge of disgrace. This is all very dramatic, he said smoothly. But I must protest. These accusations. Lord Dane, the chairwoman cut in, and her tone made the title sound like an insult. Sit down. He didn't. That was his mistake. Because power in the capital is often just knowing when to obey. Dane's smile twitched. I'm afraid I cannot, he said, voice tightening. My name is Being. Your name, I said, softly into the mic, was already on the canister handoff. The room went still again. Dane's face went pale under the perfect lighting. Then red. His hand clenched into a fist at his side, an ugly little crack in his performance. He looked around like he expected allies. But nobody moved. They watched him instead. That's the other thing about face culture. When someone starts to fall, people don't catch them. They step back so they won't be splashed. Dane's composure finally snapped. Not screaming, he was too practiced for that, but a sharp, brittle laugh that didn't match his eyes. This is absurd, he said, and his voice shook. You can't truly believe an Omega Royal and a disgraced Star Knight. Disgraced. He said it like it would poison Care. Care didn't react. But I did. I turned my head just slightly, enough for the cameras to catch the angle of my throat where the Bond warmth still lived. "I believe," I said, voice calm and deadly polite, "that you tried to make me disappear." Dane's breath hitched. The chairwoman rose. And when she spoke, it wasn't for show. "Security," she said. "Detain Lord Dane and the guild representatives pending investigation." The chamber erupted, not in noise but in movement. Senators leaning away. Whispers. Bracelets lighting up. People already rewriting their allegiance in their heads. Dane stared at me as guards approached him. His eyes weren't smug now. They were furious. Because losing face isn't just humiliation. It's rage at being seen. As they took him, he leaned toward me, voice low and shaking. "You think this ends with you?" he hissed. I held his gaze. And I answered quietly, honestly. "It ends with me choosing." His expression crumpled for one heartbeat. Then he was gone. When the doors finally sealed behind the chaos, the chairwoman's shoulders dropped a fraction, like even she was tired of performing. She looked at me, then at Care. "Prince Vea," she said carefully, "the Senate will require a statement. About your protection arrangement." Arrangement. I inhaled. Slow. This was the pivot point. The moment the story could become a leash again, if I let them. I glanced at Care. He didn't speak. He didn't decide for me. He simply waited, steadier than marble, like my choice was law. So I smiled into the cameras. Not the placating Peace Prince smile. The real one. Small. Certain. "It's not an arrangement," I said. "It's my decision." And for the first time in my life, the Senate didn't know how to respond to an Omega Royal who refused to be handled like paperwork. After the Senate detonated itself in public, you'd think the Capitol would calm down. It did not. It just switched to a different kind of chaos. The kind where everyone pretends they weren't cheering for your downfall yesterday. The trade guild's ships withdrew from Veyara within 48 hours. Not because they suddenly found morals. Because their accounts were frozen, their contracts under review, and their totally legal blockade was now being called what it was, coercion with a fancy name. The official statements came next. An investigation is ongoing. Certain individuals have been detained. Stability will be restored. Translation. We're trying to look in control while the whole system reboots. And in the middle of it all was me. Prince Liren Vea. Omega Royal Envoy. Now inconveniently, visibly, eventually pregnant. In the beginning, it wasn't visible. It was just exhaustion that clung to my bones, nausea that arrived with cruel timing, and a constant, protective awareness humming under my skin like a second heartbeat. I still had to show up. To committees. To press briefings. To private discussions that were absolutely not attempts to corner me into giving the Senate a story they could manage. I wore heavier ceremonial coats. I smiled the correct amount. I spoke calmly about reforms while my body quietly built a future. Performance versus reality became my entire life. External, perfect prince. Internal, I am so tired I could cry into a policy document. And then there was Care. He didn't move into my residence. He didn't claim anything. He didn't start acting like my body was his jurisdiction. He asked, every time, "Do you want company? Do you want space? Do you want me in the room or outside the door?" Sometimes I wanted him close. Sometimes I wanted silence. Sometimes I wanted to scream at the ceiling and demand a refund on destiny. He never took it personally. He just stayed steady. The bond mark at my throat settled into something warm and constant, like a quiet promise I could touch without shame. The Capitol, of course, tried to turn that promise into spectacle. They ran segments on royal bonding traditions. They debated whether an Omega Royal could remain an envoy while pregnant. They argued about Star Knight protocol and whether Care should be expelled for testifying. People who had never met me spoke about my choices like they were public property. I watched it happen from behind palace glass and thought, so this is what it means to be famous. Strangers fighting over your life like it's a prize. One afternoon, a senior senator, silver cufflinks, perfect hair, the usual, sat across from me in a private parlor and said, "We must consider the optics." Optics. Always optics. He smiled like he was offering helpful advice. An Omega airborne under unusual circumstances could destabilize the royal image. Royal image. Like my child was a brand risk. My fingers curled around my teacup. Care was behind me, still as stone, but I felt the quiet tension in him. Not rage. Restraint. I set the cup down gently. Then I smiled, soft and dangerous. "Senator," I said, The royal image is not more important than my life. He blinked. Not used to being spoken to like that. And, I continued, voice calm, if the Senate wishes to debate whether I'm allowed to exist while pregnant, I suggest you do it loudly. Publicly. On record. Because the Capitol hates one thing more than scandal. Transparency. The senator's smile stiffened. Of course, he said quickly. Just a consideration. He left, and the room exhaled. I turned slightly. Care's hand hovered near my shoulder. I leaned into it. Yes, my body said, my instincts said, the bond said. Care's palm rested there, warm through fabric. I won't let them reduce you, he murmured. And something in me unclenched. Months passed. Reforms moved through committees like slow thunder. The chairwoman, bless her terrifying competence, pushed new protections for Omega royals in diplomacy. Limits on assignments that used us as leverage, stronger consent laws, sanctions for pheromone weapons. Care's order held hearings. There were calls to expel him, to make an example. But the Capitol couldn't do it cleanly anymore. Because the public had seen him ask me what I wanted. They'd seen him choose accountability over silence. And the Republic, for all its flaws, still had a weakness for heroes. So instead of exile, they rewrote protocol. Star Knights were permitted to testify in cases of corruption tied to public harm. Neutrality could no longer be used as a shield for exploitation. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever is. But it was movement. And in the middle of the movement, my body kept moving too. Forward, day by day, toward a moment I both feared and wanted with my entire soul. The birth happened on a night when the Capitol was quiet for once. Rain pressed against the windows of the medical wing, turning the city lights into blurred stars. Rel, 7 rolled anxiously in the corner, projecting unhelpful graphs like stress level. High, as if I wasn't aware. I remember gripping the sheets, breathing through waves of pain, thinking, this is real. This is mine. This is happening. Care was there. Not hovering. Not commanding. Just present. He held my hand when I wanted it held. He let go when I needed space. He spoke to me in that low, steady voice that sounded like an anchor. You're doing well, he murmured. I'm here. Tell me what you need. And I did. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't have to translate my needs into diplomacy. I could just be. When it was over, when the room finally went quiet except for the small, startling sound of new life, I sobbed. Not pretty tears. Not royal tears. Real ones. The medic placed the baby in my arms, warm and impossibly small, and my entire world narrowed to that weight. I looked down, and I felt something inside me settle into place. Not destiny. Not prophecy. Choice. Care stood close, eyes shining in a way he probably hated. He didn't reach out immediately. He waited, still asking even now. I nodded, barely able to speak. He touched the baby's tiny hand with one finger. So gentle it wrecked me. Hello, he whispered, voice rough. Like he was talking to something sacred. Rel, 7 made a sound that was suspiciously like a happy beep. I laughed through tears, because of course my pilot droid was the emotional support of this entire disaster. In the weeks after, the Capitol kept buzzing. There were interviews. There were statements. There were endless attempts to make my life a symbol again. But something had changed. Because I wasn't alone anymore. I had a bond that was chosen, not forced. A partner who asked every time. A child I would fight the galaxy for. And slowly, piece by piece, we built what I started calling, half as a joke, half as a promise. Our peace pack. Not a political faction. Not a propaganda photo. A real thing. A home where I could be an Omega and a leader and a parent without apology. One evening, months later, I stood on a balcony overlooking the Capitol. The lights below looked like constellations scattered on the ground. Care came up beside me, quiet as ever. He didn't press close. He just offered his hand. I took it. Do you regret it? I asked, voice small despite myself. The scandal. The mark. The you're everything. Care's gaze stayed on the city. I regret that you were ever treated like an object, he said. Then he looked at me, and his expression softened in that rare, honest way that always made my chest ache. I don't regret choosing you. The baby stirred in my arms, making a tiny sound that felt like a heartbeat with opinions. I smiled. Not the Senate smile. The real one. If you've ever had a crush you absolutely were not supposed to have, I murmured, half to the night, half to the galaxy, you get it. Care's thumb brushed my knuckles, and the bond warmth at my throat answered, steady and sure. We didn't fix the whole republic. We didn't magically erase greed. But we did something quieter and harder. We refused to let the world decide who we were. We chose each other. We chose our child. We chose a future that belonged to us. And in a galaxy addicted to spectacle, that might be the most rebellious thing of all. If you made it all the way through my identity crisis, emotional awakening, and soft burn romance moment, drop a like and subscribe because I have way too many stories like this, and apparently no shame left.